right, fans of the Deep Thread Sports Network, we're back at you again with another podcast here, the Splash and Go podcast. You got myself, Marty, you got Josh over there, and we are obviously super excited to kick off another NASCAR season. I know I don't just speak for myself when I say NASCAR off season for me is hard. It's not an enjoyable time, but we're back. We're at Daytona. Currently, as this is being filmed, the duels are currently going on. So as of right now, we just have our base run qualifying efforts right now here in Daytona, but we're here to talk about Daytona. Obviously, we're going to talk about some silly season, and we're going to talk about what we are looking forward to in this NASCAR season. I think there's a lot to be bullish about when it comes to this season. It's interesting when a season ends, and I know Josh can kind of talk to this. Every now and again, I'll go back and I'll watch some of the older races from the season that you kind of have forgotten about, and I've been doing that. I'm excited for the season to kick off. But Josh, now that we're back, baby, what's some of your initial thoughts for the start of this season? Daytona Speed Weeks. If you have anything, just lay it on us, and from there we can go to our silly season and kind of talk about that a little bit.
And I'm excited to be back. Daytona's this weekend. I've been looking forward to this for about 2.5 months now. We had the clash at Bowman Gray, 2 weeks ago, and that was a pretty good race. I enjoyed it. It's nice to see the cars back. Um, we uh, we had a lot going on in this off season. It was pretty crazy, the stuff that went down. I'm excited though. There was a few rule changes. There's a lot we can talk about with the silly season stuff. A few drivers not returning. We had a few drivers, that had to earn their way into this Daytona race, which is pretty interesting. I'm glad to see Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex racing this weekend. Martin Truex kind of had some choice words about it, having to qualify, make it 41 cars, I think he said. And, he's for the last 20 years, I think he's earned his way into Daytona, and it's kind of a shame him and Jimmy Johnson have to race their way into it. But yeah, we can go ahead and get into silly season and a few of the things you want to talk about, Marty.
Yeah, it's a fair point. There are a lot of, and I'll just use professional bass fishing for because it's the only thing I can think of right now. But there are like a past championship. I wouldn't say, like, I guess you could call them provisionals, where it basically guarantees you a spot in the field. And I almost feel like for your crown jewels, maybe you could afford to have some of those. Like, I know that they call it like a chip status at like Bassmaster or something like that. If you've won Angler of the Year, you've won Bassmaster Classic, like you gain a chip each time you do that, and then if you have enough chips, then the other people who have chips in the field, you're basically kind of guaranteed a spot in the elite field. I feel like NASCAR could probably pretty easily do something like that. I think it's still fun as a fan to watch these people race their way in. I think, unfortunately, part of the allure of the Daytona 500 is not everybody gets to come. Sometimes a lot of people show up, and unfortunately, it breaks your heart, but you have to load up in the hauler and go home. We've seen it happen a bunch, but it's kind of part of Daytona at this point. So I don't know. I could see it both ways. I definitely could kind of see how he's just like, man, I've been a member of this sport for this long. I've been a good ambassador, and I still have to go over here and claw my with my fingernails to make it into the show. I get it. But yeah, we can kind of move on to a silly season here a little bit. I guess I think the most obvious thing that people remember from last season, at least for me, is that Stewart Haas Racing shutting down. So, for the exception of the 41 car. So, that was a huge one because you got some big name drivers there. So, you have, Chase Briscoe, who goes to the 19 car. Boy, is he been fast at Daytona, speaking of which.
Yeah, pole position, man.
Yeah. I mean, dude goes out there and hammers out a pole. I love it. Great start. You have Josh Berry going to the 21 car at the Wood Brothers Racing, which they're a Penske affiliate. I think people expect them to run better, even though I feel like the Wood Brothers 21 rides kind of ebbs and flows a little bit sometimes. But I do think Josh Berry going there is immediately going to make that team better. I know that
Yeah.
Harrison Burton got a win at Daytona last year to get into the playoffs, and this is not a shot against Harrison Burton, but I think Josh Berry is somebody who's going to make that team better. And then you have Noah Gregson, who's going over. He's going to take the Ford car. He's going to still use the Ford number, or he's going to take the Ford number from Josh Berry and Stuart Haas Racing. He's going to run that at Front Row Motorsports. Again, I think Gregson makes that team better. I definitely don't think he's a detriment. I will be kind of watching that closely just due to the fact that I feel like Front Row Motorsports is one of those teams that can't have good qualifying efforts, but once they get back in dirty air, just kind of seem to struggle when they lose track position. Uh, Another huge one to me is Ryan Preece going to Roush RFK, and once again, you see speed immediately. There are, I don't know that much about the modified series racing that he came from. I know a little bit about it, but there are a lot of drivers that truly believe in Ryan Preece's talent level. And I trust them at their word because a lot of times other drivers are right. So there are a lot of owners and a lot of drivers that think very highly of Ryan Preece. So that's another one that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. Michael McDowell going to Spire Motorsports. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, Josh, because I know that you agree with me when we kind of watch how many resources Spire Motorsports has been dumping into that team, the acquisitions that they've made. They have to start seeing results, in my opinion. I'm expecting them to,
I think
because
Michael McDowell making that move to that team, you're going to see some really big changes. We saw a lot of really good racing out of Michael McDowell this year. He was at the front of the pack. I don't know how many laps he led last season, but he had a really good season. He had a fast car. He qualified well at the super speedways. And I think it's going to be a big change for Spire. Especially with all the money they've been putting into the team. I think picking him up was a really solid pickup.
for sure. And another one that I'm super excited about on the same team is Justin Haley going to that 7 car. That is going to be huge because you also are going to have Kevin Harvick's old crew chief, Rodney Childers. So we know Rodney Childers generally. I think the consensus. Sorry, I struggled with that word. In the garage is that Rodney Childers is one of the best, a very good crew chief. I'm hoping that 7 car with Justin Haley and Rodney Childers. I once again going into this season, I'm expecting big gains from that team, but just from those two people alone. I'm expecting big gains on that 7 car. I expect them to be a car that regularly runs in the top 20, top 15, and hammering out top 10s too from time to time. If they get to a point where they could lead laps, that would be spectacular. But I'm a firm believer in Justin Haley. I've seen him do amazing things with Rick Rare Racing and Colleague Racing before that. He is just a very good driver. I'm looking forward immensely to that. Todd Gilliland is just going to still be a Front Row Motorsports. He's just going to be in the 34 car now. Um, I like Todd Gilliland too. I think he's a consistent driver that finds ways to finish races and get the most out of sometimes the team just needs to finish races. And I think Front Row Motorsports got to a point where they needed to finish races. And I thought Todd Gilliland did a good job doing that. I thought Michael McDowell did a good job doing that. But if I have to, my silly season, I guess you could call it storyline that I'm keeping my closest eye on, it's the 7 car Spire Motorsports, Justin Haley, Rodney Childers duo. I want to see them have success.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think, I touched on it a little bit. I think Michael McDowell's, I'm really with it this year. When we did our playoff stuff last year and, our pick'ems every week, I kind of used McDowell a little early in the season. And I wish I would have held on to him for a couple of those speedway races, to help me with some points. And really saw him perform last year in that car. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, to backtrack here a little bit, you mentioned Bowman Gray. What did you think of that? What you saw of that? Did you? I thought it was significantly better than the Coliseum. My personal opinion.
Yeah, I liked it a lot more than the Coliseum. And that's a historic racetrack. They should have been racing there for years doing this going back. When was the last time they raced there? In the
Oh my gosh,
80s?
it's going. I think before that, it's going back.
It's like 76 maybe. I don't
Yeah.
remember. It's been a long time. And that's some heritage to the motorsport. The Coliseum was cool. They could do stuff like that, to kind of maybe, bring awareness to sport to people that, aren't really into the sport. I agree with that as well, trying to market the sport. but you also have your grassroots of where this racing came from. And if you're going to do early season or preseason short track racing, you need to kind of pay homage to some of these smaller tracks and these communities that helped bring the sport up, years ago. And I thought it was good racing. A lot of people don't like the short track stuff. It wasn't a very long race, but hey, it's a taste. It gets you fired up for the season, kind of gives you a break during football. And, it's something to do on a Sunday other than watch old races or watch playoff football. So I enjoyed it.
For sure. Yeah, I was surprised by it. I thought the racing wasn't going to be very good there. I thought it myself personally, I expected it to be more of the same that we saw at the Coliseum, was my opinion of it. And it was way better than that. We saw Ryan Blaney come through the field, make a long, hard charge to the front, was able to pass vehicles. It wasn't easy to pass, but it's never going to be easy to pass at a track like that, I would imagine. So I liked what I saw there. It does still kind of feel a little bit dirty to me to kind of start off not having the shootout at Daytona. I'm an older NASCAR fan now that still remembers the Speed Channel days where Speed Weeks and NASCAR preseason Thunder or whatever they used to call it back in the day, where you had a month long, you had updates every day if something happened in that Daytona. They had month long testing and practice, and they did all this stuff. And I do miss those days, of course. I wish that we had longer weekends and more stuff to watch. And
Kind of like
but
how they do the Indy 500 every year. That's a month long event.
yeah,
Honestly, as soon as the Indy 500 is over, you're preparing for the next year.
yeah,
Yeah, as a matter of factly, those guys are out there. That track's getting tested constantly and constantly. So, but it doesn't really, as fans, it's not really brought to light until about a month before.
yeah. So I miss those days. But I think NASCAR is still, like you said, you touched on it, like the grassroots tracks. Like it used to be, the biggest argument was there was a lot of tracks that NASCAR went away from because NASCAR was getting kind of too big for its britches in the golden years there in the early 2000s to mid 2000s. And they didn't have enough bleachers. NASCAR drew a big crowd. Now that NASCAR doesn't draw as big of a crowd, I think that you can go back to some of those older tracks. I would love to see another race at Rockingham. I don't
Yeah.
think that's going to happen, but I would love to see a race like that again. I miss that track a lot. And there's a whole host of them. I mean, you can name a lot of tracks. I mean, I know North Wilkesboro, people didn't necessarily like the racing there, but I feel like as that track got some age and some character to it and stuff, I think things would do well. I liked it when they went to Iowa, last season. I think you can branch out and you can trial. We don't have to go to the same tracks every single year, especially if they're not big tracks that bring in a large crowd. I don't have a problem with NASCAR kind of switching that up every now and again if they can logistically do it.
And I think NASCAR kind of needs to take a step back and realize that a lot of these tracks across our country are shutting down, whether they're drag strips, they're circle tracks, they're road courses. People are building their houses next to these, and they're shutting these tracks down. Motorsports as a whole, if we don't embrace it and the sport doesn't embrace it, you're going to see a very large decline in these racetracks. Hey, let's go do a weekend at Laguna Seca. I mean, these tracks are on the verge of closing down, and because of these communities around there, and maybe you shouldn't build your house, within earshot of a racetrack. I personally wouldn't. Well, maybe I would, because I like racing, but I think I think that NASCAR has a chance here in the next like coming seasons to kind of bring some life back to these tracks and invest a little bit of money and I think when they do that, the people will show up.
I agree with you. There are things you can do. Like people don't realize, like it's not like there's street racing outside your house. You can do. I mean, we see it all the time. They'll put these sound blocks, these sound breaks, and they can strategically place them to where they can try to contain sound. But like it works better than a lot of people think. You see it on interstates. When interstates whiz by people's homes, they have very specific sound breaks that they will put up to try to knock down that Jake brake noise of that semi going by at 2 in the morning. And there's tracks you can do things to minimize noise, but also, like you said, there are tracks where we're losing not only just heritage but just pure history. There is a pure history at the Nashville Fairgrounds, and the number one reason why we can't go back there, when you hear people talk about how much Darrell Waltrip cut his teeth at that track, Sterling Marlin back in the day, before these people became big names, they cut their teeth at tracks like this because they were great tracks and they were hard tracks, they were physical tracks, they were short tracks that were unique. And I've always wished you could see race modern day racing there just to see what it would look like. And I feel like now's the time to experiment with that. And I think NASCAR is open to it. I would have never thought that a road course or street course in Chicago would have worked out very well.
Me, I don't particularly care for that. And I was about to use this as an example. Why are we using these road courses in the middle of these cities when we have these dying racetracks all across the country? And is
100%
it
agree.
cool? Is it cool? Oh, okay, well, let's make the season, another week longer, and let's use some of these tracks, or let's do some preseason events, or some, when they have
Exhibition
the
events.
exhibition events, invite
You
these
don't have to
F1.
show up if you don't want to. I mean,
Yeah,
make it an open invitation. If you
yeah.
guys don't have the resources or don't want to spend the resources to show up, don't show up. Just say open invitation. We'll have a
Let's
few
do,
cameras there. And
let's
if
do
you
some
guys
R
want to
and
go and
D.
run them, yeah, I agree. But they won't do
Let's
that because of the testing
Yeah.
policies. They cut back for
Well,
ownership to try to save money. But yeah, I catch your drift. Like just do a random like shootout style exhibition randomly.
yeah.
Um,
And team these guys, there's so many ideas. I watch some of these YouTubers do this stuff where they're like, you race 100 laps and then you switch drivers. Hey, why don't you
oh
have these
yeah,
guys? Why don't you have these guys team up with some, either, some ARCA drivers, or,
I like it. Yeah.
even invite some F1 drivers or some IndyCar drivers, on a weekend instead of just at Daytona, where these guys are trying to get in, and use these tracks.
Well,
Let these guys get on a
yeah,
short track. Let them get on
yeah.
an actual road course like Laguna Seca. I would, if they announce tomorrow that they're going to race in Laguna Seca next season, I would probably go. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm 1,000 miles away, and
Mm-hmm.
there's no seating at Laguna Seca.
Right, right.
The start
But
finish.
you want to be there. You want to be amongst it. You want to be in that
Yeah,
environment. You want to be a part of that history. And I like the idea that you had where you're like, maybe I grab an ARCA car. Like you could have like a pro am exhibition where a pro and an amateur and you guys, or a non NASCAR sanctioned race car driver go out and do a little, have these drivers go out and do a little scouting, maybe let them pick their
yeah.
other driver. And then, there might be a good way to get some eyes on like a hidden Carl Edwards or something, a hidden gem. You never know. But the
Or
more
invite.
that you go out and reach out to these smaller grassroots tracks, it would only help them if you did stuff like that.
Yeah. And do it at these smaller tracks and these tracks that are dying, and invite celebrities out to drive,
Yeah.
and make it a full week event, where these guys are out there driving, and put it on NASCAR.com for 3 hours a day of it, and make the news and bring awareness to the sport. That's how you build these relationships also with these sponsors.
It would probably be tough for NASCAR to swing just because the broadcast rights of who they have it with, but I would find it
Yeah.
hard to believe that you wouldn't be able to get some way, somehow, flow racing involved.
Yeah. Or Amazon. I mean, we're racing on Amazon
Yeah,
this season, I
sure.
mean,
It
it's
would be
just
cool. It would be cool. I know it's a big ask and I know the season's long, but that's why I would make it optional. If you're a driver that's worn out or you have sponsor obligations or you're on family vacation, you don't have to show up. Don't feel like I would make the pot big enough to where it'd be cool if you won, but I wouldn't make it to where people felt like it was another thing they had to do.
mhm.
It would just be something cool. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
we're losing sponsors left and right. We lost FedEx this year. I mean that's a big loss, for
yeah,
the sport. And they have to figure out something. And I do think going back to these places like Bowman Gray is a good start. But
yeah.
I think we need to see some consistency with it. And maybe I'm wrong. The sponsors do like these big Chicago street races, and racing in, there's talks they're going to Mexico this year, and then they're coming back to Virginia, I believe, like within a week. So I mean, and maybe the sponsors do like that. I would assume Red Bull's on board for like 6 races this season with
That's big.
Van Gisbergen, and I would assume the Mexico race is going to be one of them. I think they're on board with him for 6 races this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, that's good. The energy drinks bring in money. I mean, look at how many Monster sponsors in it's like off and on like three or four different drivers
Yeah, and it's been
off and on
almost
throughout
20.
the season. So, and it's
It's
been a while since Red Bull's been in NASCAR.
Yeah, almost 20 years. I think it was like 2006, 2007 they left. They left right around the
Casey
same
Kane
time
won.
Chrysler did.
Yeah, Casey Kane won. I think Brad Keselowski won in 2012. That was like the last Dodge. Casey Kane won before he went to Hendrick Motorsports. It was like he needed a ride until he got to Hendrick Motorsports a year later, and it was with Red Bull Racing. I think it was at Phoenix or something. I do not remember the year though. It evades me, but yeah, it's been a while. It was like I remember Brian Vickers and Scott Speed being the first two drivers, or I'm sorry, AJ Allmendinger and Scott Speed, and then Brian Vickers went over there. But yeah, that's going back some way, in some time there.
Yeah.
But so kind of on to Daytona here. I mean, we haven't been able to see much, but anything really that sticks out to you on this, Josh? I mean, I think that like I said, as of right now, the duels are currently going on, so we don't know how anybody looks in a draft as of the time of filming this. But I
I
kind of
will.
feel like it's the same. This key people you would think are up there, other than Ty Gibbs. You had to make a shout out to him on his qualifying effort. That was pretty
Mhm.
impressive.
I mean, I'm looking at it right now. Bubba Wallace is in the lead. He's got 21 laps under his belt in the lead, but they've also had 20 lead changes, and I believe they're doing 65 laps or 70
Yeah, I think so.
laps.
Yep, somewhere around there, I believe.
So I mean, I think we're gonna see a lot of action on Sunday. If we're getting this many lead changes in this amount of laps,
Yeah,
I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I'm really excited about Chase Briscoe taking the pole position. I think the way he ended his season, given the circumstances he was in last year, and then him coming in and, coming in this high, this early, first race of the season coming in,
yeah,
taking the pole position. I really think Chase Briscoe is going to be a problem this season,
oh yeah.
and he was a problem last season. He had a little bit of bad luck. His Stewart House shut down, and he still showed up and raced every weekend.
He made lemons out of lemonade. There's no
Yeah.
denying it. That situation sucked for everybody at Stewart
Hmm.
Haas last season, and he found a way to dig deep. And I think that shows a driver that's committed to keep their team motivated through all that. I think if your driver's in the shop doing the right things as a team, you want to come out and you want to do well for that driver. But talk about a statement coming out, and he was like during qualifying, he was significantly faster than everybody else.
Oh yeah.
It was like significantly. It was obvious he was clearly
Hmm.
faster than everybody else, and that's a great statement. I mean, what a way to start your season. That's for a new team. That helps. That's
It
always
has
cool.
it has to feel good,
Has
you
to
know.
feel good. Has to feel good. And if you're a Chase Briscoe fan, it has to feel good to see him running up to his potential, because I think a lot of people saw him in the Bush series and saw how talent. I'm sorry, Bush series. I'm aging myself again. This would have been Xfinity series, and he was extremely skilled. There's no denying that, and I think everybody kind of expects him to be a good Cup driver, and I think he is under the right circumstances with the right team, and it's pretty cool to watch. Like I said, I was really impressed with Ty Dillon. Good for him to come in a
Mhm.
colleague car and plant that out there. Oh, a person we have to talk about, Dale Jr. attempting to make his first start as a Cup Series owner with Justin Allgaier in the number 40
Mhm.
Chevrolet, the Traveler Whiskey Chevrolet. Thing is awesome looking, and it's Daytona. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand the importance of the Earnhardt name at Daytona. I mean, he's coming out here to try to make his first start as an owner. I hope it works out. I can't imagine how good a Dale Jr. would be to go to Daytona and not have to pack up that car and go home. I feel like that would be hard for any owner to swallow, but an Earnhardt especially, I think that would make him sick. So I'm
Um,
there's a part of me that's nervous for him, but I hope it works out. So I mean I don't see anything surprising yet in Daytona. The one thing that I will say though that's going to irritate me, I'm sure at some point, and maybe the broadcast will be good about not exactly pointing it out, but I'm sure at some point we're going to see fuel saving in the Daytona 500. There's no way around it until you make it to where not every other team can see your SMT data, You're never going to be able to keep this from happening especially at a restrictor plate track when you're not having to zip tires on. Even if you do have to zip tires on, it doesn't matter. The fuel is what takes the longest time on pit road now. That's the biggest downside of going away from the 5 lug to the single hub, center hub style, lock nut, whatever you call it. Our pit stops, all we care about now is gas. How long do I have to fill up my vehicle? How long do I have to be on pit road? That's what makes up the most time on these restrictor plate tracks because it gets pretty hard to pass out there when it's 3 wide parking lot and you can't go anywhere. So I know at some point we're going to see gas saving. I'm just going to have to deal with it. I'm going to have to hope that it's still exciting. And I don't want to see a snooze fest for Daytona 500. That's not the way I like to start out my season. Hopefully, I don't think we will see that. Hopefully, we see a nice little surprise winner or something. That always makes me happy. I like when Cindric won a few years ago. I like when McDowell won, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I like that stuff. I like the guy who doesn't get to win very often to come to the biggest stage. And man, that's cool. I like to see that
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm excited for it. Kind of looking at some of these drivers right now, man. Dude, I want to make some season predictions, but
I
I'm
know.
looking at some of these drivers and some of their moves they've made, man, and like, man, it's hard. It really
Mhm.
is hard. I mean, uh, all these drivers are very skilled. Um, I'm a little, we always harp on Denny Hamlin and stuff like that, but I think it's hard not to bring him up coming into the season,
Sure.
losing, like I said, losing a major sponsor. And he's kind of getting a little bit older, and he had a rough postseason last year,
Yeah.
and I really haven't been following him too much in the off season, as much as I dislike him as a person or whatnot. But I'm kind of hoping he has a better season this year. I'm hoping that Toyota team figured that car out a little bit better, and maybe the way he performed in that postseason might light a fire under his ass, and
Yeah.
he might start driving a little more aggressive this season. And he was an aggressive driver last season at the beginning of the season. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if
It was odd.
it
It
was
was
weird.
odd.
It's like he lost his edge in the postseason, and hopefully he can maybe find that back, and because it does make for good racing and interesting racing, and it's fun
Yeah.
to see him battle it out with somebody, and it's even more fun when he loses the battle. But you know, I'm
Yep.
I'm I'm kind of interested to see, how his season starts. I feel like we kind of have to talk about him.
Yeah, and to be fair, Denny Hamlin does not strike me as the type of driver that if he's as somebody who will stay in the sport when he feels like he or his team he's on is no longer competitive.
Mhm.
I don't think he's interested in that at all. I think the moment that Denny Hamlin realizes I don't think I can win a championship, I think he's going home and hanging out with his wife and daughters.
Mhm.
Legitimately, I think that's what he will do. And I think he will focus on his race team that he started. I don't see him sticking around and being somebody that runs top 10, not in regular um you know what I mean, not fighting up front regularly for the lead, not trying to,
Mhm.
not being able to fight for wins. I see Denny Hamlin hanging that up.
Yeah.
And hopefully this season's not that season. Like you said, I enjoy Denny Hamlin being in the storylines typically when another driver's wrecked him or beat him. Or, but Denny Hamlin's gonna win. I'm relatively convinced of that.
Mhm.
But something was off in the playoffs. It was weird. It was very hard to put your finger on it. They had lost something serious, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if they showed up to the playoffs and realized that other people had been working in these other areas on speed that they weren't, and they didn't have it. Very possible. I'm not sure what that was, but I guess we'll get into if you had to pick. So I'm we're gonna have to make our Daytona 500 picks. Colin told me his. If we don't pick him, and he gave me a couple backups just in case.
Okay.
But the thing about Daytona is I rarely pick a big name or not necessarily not. I rarely pick somebody you expect to win, maybe. I give you a little bit of a dark horse for Daytona. Typically is what I do. So I'm gonna make a pick and it's gonna be a depending on who you pick, I'll let you go first.
Oh boy.
I'll pick some goofy ones. And
So you're picking multiple?
No, I'm
You
just
know,
gonna
pick
pick
a guy.
one. I'm just gonna pick one guy, like one guy who you think, like if you had to put money on to finish top five in Daytona 5 or win.
Top five or win.
Yeah, if you had to put money on him.
I'm gonna go Ryan Blaney.
Yeah, I like that pick. But
Oh,
he's
he
won,
won.
but
He
he's
he
won
won
in
the night race.
speedways. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he's had speedway wins for sure. He's a very
yeah.
good speedway driver. All right, so
It's,
Colin picked. So Colin's pick is going to be Christopher Bell, which I think is a sporty pick. I just for Daytona, I'm still looking for that kind of random person, and I'm going to go with Justin Haley in the seventh car.
Mhm.
This Corey LaJoy, when he ran for the seventh car, typically ran good at Daytona. I think Corey LaJoy was a good speedway driver, but I think the same thing out of Justin Haley. I think that he is at a point in his career where he feels like now is probably the time where he needs to make a difference, and I think he can. I think we saw Carson Hosfar at times at Spire last year really make that cool big step, and I'm going to go with Justin Haley. It was between him and Chris Buescher because Chris Buescher is solid. The dude finds ways to have top 10 finishes. And when he's in the top five, I feel like he's a risk to win. I really did. It was a great race between him and SVG at Watkins Glen last year. I loved watching it. I loved that race. What a great race that ended up being. We didn't
And
have the tire
speaking
wear we thought we were going to have, but it still ended up being a classic race because of look at who he had to beat to win that
speaking
race.
of SVG, full time driver in the Cup Series this year. I'm really excited about that.
Absolutely.
I've already ordered a couple shirts and a hat, and I'm on board with it.
Those
So
WeatherTech paint schemes are filthy too.
yeah, yeah. I'm hoping he's like I said, he's getting a little Red Bull sponsorship. I think he's going to be the driver that gets it, and I'm looking forward to maybe some Red Bull gear with the
For sure.
88 on it this season, and you know
For sure.
get to support him.
He looked pretty good at Bowman Gray too.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think he finished in the top 10 or near it. He was running good there. So that's another very good, important thing. We don't want to miss out on SVG. That
Yeah.
it,
That's probably the money line for this weekend. SVG pick. Maybe I'll
all
drive over
right,
to Illinois and put some money on it.
there you go. There you go.
Speaking of, though, of the number seven car and Justin Haley and your pick, Corey LaJoy not having a ride this year.
Yeah,
Um, that kind of sucks.
it
I
does
think
because he's been a voice for the sport. He's been a voice for the sport for a while, especially with his Stacking Pennies podcast. He's somebody who's tried to make sure and try to reach as many people as he can with his being a driver. He specifically took time out of his already very packed schedule to always have a very good podcast and always try to reach out to fans. And so, yeah, it does suck. I wanted nothing but success for Corey LaJoy. I was not a Corey LaJoy hater. I mean, he wrecked Denny Hamlin a couple times. I mean, I can't hate him that much.
I mean, he wrecked himself many a times too.
Yes,
So
he did. Yes, he
it
did.
it sucks because it's a running joke. But I do like his Stacking Pennies podcast, and he does
Yeah.
devote a lot of time to being a good ambassador of the sport.
Yep. And he had beef with Denny Hamlin for a while. So the dude is
Yeah.
already
Don't we
in a good
all?
spot with me. Don't we all? So yeah, that's all I have for today's episode. I'm obviously keeping an eye on Daytona. We're obviously going to be active during that race on social media and on Twitter and things of that nature. So please continue to follow us on those social media platforms.
Joey Logano is going to get four this year.
Really,
Yeah. You don't like it?
it's
I mean,
bold.
it was a hell of a prediction last year, wasn't it?
I mean, Alex Bowman being a little underweight is what won Joey Logano that championship.
Oh, okay.
For being,
Uh,
I'm not saying he didn't go out and win it at
yeah.
Phoenix because he did.
And
He
it
did. He
wasn't
won it at
the two.
Phoenix.
How many wins did he win in the playoffs? Two? Was it two?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but he wouldn't be there if it wasn't for
He
that damn
won.
Austin Dillon.
Boston Dillon, no, it was that damn Alex Bowman hit that curb and like a chunk of his car fell off, and they're like, "Well, you're underweight, bud."
Yeah,
So, but yeah, you're right. That is kind of the boomer in me being like, "It ain't legit."
Yeah, it's got an asterisk next
It's
to it.
got an asterisk next to it, like the birds charging on the power lines. We got the birds aren't real type shit going on. Man, the beginning of the season pick to win a championship, that is tough.
Yeah, I probably won't stick with it all season unless he comes out and wins Daytona, and then I'm just gonna be like, well, four championships.
Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney. He's
Think
Matt
Ryan
Buffett.
Blaney, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a Ford again, dude. I think it's going to be Penske again. They have cracked the code. Until they lose, they've cracked the code, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Until they lose at Phoenix at the end of the year, why in the hell would I put my money on anybody else? You'd be like not picking Dominic Hasek in like the late
Yeah.
90s, early 2000s if you had a game seven in the Stanley Cup finals. Like, how the hell, as much as I hated Dominic Hasek because of the way he played, the way he flopped, but whatever. Like, how in the hell do you not pick him in game seven of the Stanley Cup finals? So until somebody beats Penske, I'm gonna go with that. I like Ryan Blaney. I like his swagger. I think he's found hit his stride as a Cup Series driver. And if I was gonna make one pick, well, that's who mine's gonna be. Colin's not here to make his pick, but I'm willing to bet it'd be if I had to pick for him, Colin, I'm putting words in your mouth, William Byron. He's a big Willie B fan. He's
Billy B
regularly
or
talks.
Chris Bell, I would say for Colin.
He also
He's a
likes
big
Radic a lot too.
yeah, yeah. Man, did he choke at their postseason? He had one good race and
Yeah. Oh,
man,
had a great race, especially if it was
yeah,
a championship.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Well, all right, man. We got Daytona 500 this weekend, Sunday, 2:30 on Fox. Tune in, check it out. The following week we have Atlanta, so we'll be back after Sunday, cover the race and all the excitement on Sunday. Hopefully, Colin will be here, and then we'll move on to Atlanta. NASCAR season has officially started. If you get time this weekend, there's numerous races. When's the ARCA race? I know there's some like YouTubers that are involved with the ARCA race. Cletus McFarland's
Yep.
actually got his way into a car this year, and he's running an
It's
ARCA.
incredible.
Isn't it amazing, dude? The guy started out putting turbos on Corvettes, and now he's
Yep.
racing at Daytona in an ARCA car. And he qualified well, apparently. Or he practiced very well. He was, they said during his practice, if it would have been qualifying, he would have been in like third place for
That's awesome.
qualifying.
Like we said, we're very excited to be back. I've been waiting for this one for a long time, so I'm very excited to be back. I'm happy to be doing this podcast again. I'm happy to be involved with NASCAR again, and we'll definitely get to see you next weekend. So in the meantime, everybody, please watch Daytona. If you're going to watch any race all season long, please watch this one, and I'll throw in Indy 500 in there as well. But thanks for joining us. And if you like everything that you see here, hit like, hit subscribe, and we appreciate it. Have a good one.
See ya.